Alright everyone, we are jumping into muscles this week, and most of our focus this week is going to be on skeletal muscle tissue, and then we'll touch briefly on the first two sections from chapter 10, covering muscle naming and organization in the body and stuff like that, but most of what we're focusing on is going to be the skeletal muscle tissue. So, I'm not going to go through all these learning objectives, but we're going to just kind of look at how muscle tissue is organized. We'll briefly touch on the three types of muscle tissue. We'll talk a little bit about tendons, and then most of our focus is going to be on how muscles contract and relax. So we're going to go through some of the physiology of that, as well as the anatomy and how the physiology and anatomy work together to allow muscles to function the way that they do, and then we'll touch a little bit on development and regeneration of muscle tissue. So we are going to start off with our first section of this chapter, just an overview of muscle tissues. So remember, from our tissues unit, there are three different types of muscle tissue: skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. We're going to focus most of our energy right now on skeletal muscle. So muscle tissue has some main characteristics that are common to all three types of muscle tissue. These are excitability, so the ability of the tissue, the ability of that cell to change the electrical state and send an electrical wave, which is called an action potential, that is going to trigger certain things to happen in those cells. Our next characteristic is elasticity. So this is how muscles can bounce back after they have changed shape in some way. Our next characteristic is extensibility. So this is the ability of a muscle to stretch or extend. So this is part of it changing shape. And then contractility, which is how muscles can pull on their attachment points and shorten. All right, so those are all characteristics common to all three types of muscle tissue. So we talked about some of this already, but skeletal muscle has striations. It is going to be multinucleated, so there's going to be multiple nuclei in a single muscle cell, and skeletal muscle is the only type of our three muscle tissues that are voluntary, so they are under conscious control. And then we've got cardiac and smooth muscle tissue. Cardiac muscle tissue is also striated. There's usually only going to be a max of 2 nuclei per cell, and this is involuntary, so no conscious control. This is automatically signaled. And then smooth muscle tissue is called smooth tissue because it does not have striations. It's only going to have 1 nucleus per cell, and this is also involuntary contraction. So these are just microscope images of the different types of muscle tissue here. And so we've got the skeletal muscle up here in panel A. All right. So that is going to have, can't really tell that there's striations in here in these particular images, but striations are going to be a bunch of little lines in the muscle tissue. We'll see better examples of that later in this lecture series this week. Panel B here in the middle is smooth muscle tissue, and so you can see that there's not a lot of lines through it, and we can see the nucleus in each of the cells here. And then down here in panel C is cardiac muscle tissue, which is shaped very, very differently. It's also going to be striated again, but the actual shape of the cells is really, really different. They tend to be in kind of like Y or V shapes. All right, let's start talking about skeletal muscle specifically. We'll touch more on cardiac and smooth muscle tissue when we get to the chapters that involve those. So in cardiac muscle tissue, we'll cover that when we talk about the heart midway through the semester, and then we'll talk more about smooth muscle tissue a little bit when we cover the digestive system, and even a little bit when we do blood vessels, since it's found in those as well. So section 3 of this chapter is looking a lot at how the muscles are organized, so the different layers of connective tissues, in and around our skeletal muscle cells. We're going to look at how the muscles work with tendons, and then look at different areas of the muscle fibers and talk about something called excitation contraction coupling, which is partially how these muscle cells are going to contract or shorten. So skeletal muscle specifically has some different functions. Voluntary movements is one, so the ability of us to move our body, to raise your hand, to walk, to remain upright, to sit, to stand, to lay down, to do all of our normal general daily movements. Those are all voluntary movements. Next function is just general maintenance of skeletal stability, so keeping our bones where they're supposed to be, and then ensuring that those bones are moving only the ways that they're supposed to be and not too far out of their normal range of motion. Skeletal muscle can also help regulate materials entering and exiting the body, and so this also ties a little bit into the digestive system, but only very, very little at the mouth and then at the rectum. So we'll talk more about that actually when we cover the digestive system, but that is another job of skeletal muscle. It's also going to help protect some of our internal organs, so a lot of our abdominal muscles are going to help offer protection to the abdominal organs along with the abdominal fat. And then thermoregulation is another one, which is helping us to maintain our body temperature. So shivering when you get cold is actually a bunch of skeletal muscle contractions that's going to generate heat and warm you up a little bit. So skeletal muscles are going to have 3 layers of connective tissue that are helping to make up skeletal muscles. So these 3 layers are the epimysium, paramysium, and endomysium. So the epimysium is going to surround the entire muscle, separating that muscle from other tissues and organs in the area, so keeping it separate from blood vessels and nerves and stuff like that. The next layer is the paramysium. This is going to surround individual bundles of muscle fibers that are called fascicles. I have an example of that in a minute. And then the endomysium is going to surround the individual muscle fibers themselves. So we're just kind of increasing in what these layers of connective tissues are holding together. So this is what some of those look like. So around all of these different bundles of muscle fibers is going to be that epimysium. This is what tendons are connecting to and are going to then link into bones for connecting muscles to bones, because that's what tendons do. That paramysium is going to surround those muscle fascicles or muscle fibers. So we get these bundles of those fibers in here, and multiple bundles are going to make up a single muscle. And then deeper down is that endomysium that is surrounding a single muscle fiber itself. And then some associated cells that are going to help maintain and assist with keeping those muscle cells in good shape and in good health. All right, we'll get into these deeper layers like the sarcolemma and myofibrils a little bit later. All right, we are going to pause or stop here, and we will continue talking about the neuromuscular junction in the next video.